Okay, hello, welcome everyone to day 3 of the Structural Peace Lab, where we're exploring pathways for transforming conflict, healing collective trauma, and building peace. Somebody's saying they can't log in.
Yes, the old login is no longer valid.
Okay, you get her? Okay. And what we've been doing for the last 2 days, for those who are popping in here for the first time, I think we haven't seen Tishan or Libby before. I thought we had someone else, but I'm not seeing her anymore. What we've been doing for the last 2 days, exploring different methodologies for addressing conflict at self, social, and system levels, particularly within the context of racism, so addressing racism, the lens of racism. And on day 1, we dealt with the spiritual aspect of ourselves and how we bring spirit as a grounding and a source and resource for the work that we're doing in the world. Yesterday, we went through NVC approach to systemic oppression, nonviolent communication approach to systemic oppression. And today, we were to go through restorative justice with Charlotte Calkin. And we think that there has been a time, there's been a timing error. And she, because of the time zones, thought it was much later than it is now. So instead of doing that exercise in restorative justice, today we are going to have Associate Professor of the State University in New York, Delia Williams Gunpot, who's also a research fellow at the Columbia University, working in the area of public health inequities. And she is going to give us a grounding on the issue of structural racism, which we will then open up for a discussion and really center what we are doing through this lens of structural racism. Does that sound okay?
Love it.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me energy, Adam. You know, everybody likes to be quiet. Yolanda, we think that there's a time issue. Well, not we think, we know there's a timing issue with Charlotte. Several of the speakers thought today their sessions was an hour later, and we've had to be calling and saying, no, you're on now, get on now. And it happened yesterday as well. Didn't it happen with Sophie yesterday as well?
We're not doing CET again or CST or any of those things.
Yeah,
Just
it's
not
because
doing it anymore.
it's because so much of the team were in Europe and
we're not doing it.
All right, we won't do it. But Yolanda, you heard the what we're doing instead. We'll have Delia Williams Gunpot center this whole thing in racism, because remember, we are looking at this conflict issue through the lens of specific lens of racism, and so it actually kind of makes sense to have the session centered around that. So Delia will do a presentation to us, and then we're going to open it up for discussion around the question of how do we really begin to transform conflict in the context of racism, and how do we start building, healing collective and intergenerational trauma, and and making peace with each other. So let's go. If you're ready.
Yay! Give her some energy. Let's go.
Let's give some energy. Go. Wait, no. Alessia, you want to ground us first? Sorry.
You want to come into the room? Okay, open the question. All right, everybody, sit on your sit bones. My favorite part of this exercise is usually explaining to large men that they need to pull their butts out from under them. Cracks me up every time. So dancers sit on their sit bones. So just really sit in your chair and sit up. And if you take your hands and just really, grab your butt. It's your butt. You know, if you're not in a place to grab your butt, don't do it. But if you can, just make sure that you're sitting on your bones, on your hip bones, and feel your spine lengthen and feel your weight in the chair. part of the work that we do has to do with devotion. And when you think about breathing in 17,000 times a day, that's devotion. You breathe in 17,000 times a day and you breathe out 17,000 times a day. Let's do some heart centering. If you feel more comfortable turning off your camera or you want to close your eyes, you can do that. Take your dominant hand and just put it on your chest. And just feel your heartbeat. And you can take your other hand and just put it on your belly button, over your belly button. And holding yourself in this way is a really grounding and soothing gesture. And you're going to begin to breathe and direct the breath down to the hand that you have on your tummy. And just let the breath deepen. And just notice what it feels to be breathing in your body right now. This is a really uncertain time. And there are a lot of things that we can't control. And sometimes all we can do is get very present with the fact that our heart is beating. And we can take one breath and another breath. And we go through life powered on the breath. Our lungs are like sails that take the breath and help us to move forward. Right in this instant, with the certainty of our heartbeat and the power of our breath, right in this instant, we have everything that we need. Take a couple more breaths there. And just feel that safety. And when you're ready, you can come back to the room.
Thank you, Alyssa. And thank you. And I'm thinking before we jump in, perhaps we can have the new people who are joining us today. And to be fair to them, we should probably introduce ourselves as well. So maybe we're small enough so that we can do it. Maybe we could have a round of introductions. I'll start. Hi, I'm Margaret, one of the founders of the Future Law Institute. And as I've been sharing every day in this lab, this is my special space, my safe space, a wonderful space where we're really exploring change from the inside out. And if we're thinking about how do we negotiate the new normal, it's about how do we embody that which we're trying to manifest in the world, and what are the pathways to exploring that. And so, yeah, that's me. And I nominate Alyssa.
Hello. Thanks for joining us on Sunday. I'm Alyssa. I've been co-creating in this since the start of COVID, and this has been an amazing journey. I am really glad that you all are all here. I found out that I love puzzles, and since puzzles and complex systems, and since human beings are the most puzzling complex system we know, here I am. I nominate Amanda because you're cracking up at me, so you get to go next.
I take it we're doing introductions.
Yes.
Yes. I'm Amanda. I am here because I feel that in the Peace Lab, there's going to be tools and skills and concepts and process and inspiration for work that I feel called to do. So that's why I'm here. Yeah. Oh, I have to nominate someone. Let me see. I nominate Titian Rose. Oh, did I pronounce that wrong? I'm sorry if I did.
Hello, Amanda. Thank you so much. Okay, it's Tishan Rose. I am here. I'm sorry, I'm in a car, so it's a lot of things happening.
Okay.
But I am here because there's a lot happening in the world right now, and I really I just think it's an important opportunity for us to sit and reflect and understand, you know.
Okay. At the sense of it. Have I frozen?
You did
everybody
briefly.
looks
Back with
okay,
us.
right. Okay. Oh, Tishan, try now. We can see you.
Oh, there, you didn't hear me.
It wasn't good.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. I'm moving, but I'm just thankful for this space. I was just saying simply that it's a moment with just a lot of dynamism in the world, and I think an opportunity to just kind of reflect and understand our contribution to the change is important. So I'm really grateful for this space. I'm just here to contribute my energy in whatever way that I can.
Welcome. Exciting to have
I
you.
nominate Libby as the next person.
I believe I heard Titian Rose say she wants to contribute her energy in the best way she can, and that's a beautiful aspiration that I would like to join in this space. I'm very much appreciative of this conference to the extent I've been able to participate, and I believe restorative justice is a theme that we'll be addressing, or some kind of peace.
Were you here at the beginning? Did you join us late, Libby?
I was a little bit late.
Okay.
I think maybe 15 minutes.
Okay, so let me set the expectations, because Charlotte, a few of our speakers, based on something that went out, have been thinking that they are 1 hour later than they actually are. So Charlotte's going to be late, but we are doing something else. We have Associate Professor of the State University in New York and Research Fellow in Columbia University, Delia Williams Gunpot here. And so we are having a discussion around structural racism today.
Beautiful.
So,
beautiful.
Okay, great.
Totally.
So great.
Thank you.
All right. So who would you like to nominate to go next?
Yolanda?
Hi, thank you, Libby. My name is Yolanda Jansen, and I'm a transformational coach, and I am ready to make new contributions or show up in a different way than I have in the past, times around structural oppression. I'm gonna leave it at that. I nominate Adam.
Thanks, Yolanda. For the past 4 years, I've been what I'd consider a community cohesion facilitator, because I run a non-profit organisation in the south of England, which is all about bringing people together from diverse backgrounds to embrace their diversity and to support each other towards their personal goals, ideas and ambitions. And I really get energized by this group of wonderful people, as we've all got a shared vision for wanting to explore how we can use empathy, or radical empathy, as we've come to develop it, led by our vision holder, Margaret, how that can be used for reconciliation and for system change as well. And it's a really exciting and invigorating journey to be on. And there's a long way to go. Great to be here. Charlotte's just popped up. Let's go to you. Charlotte, we're doing introductions.
Charlotte.
Hello, for some reason I had it down as 6:30, not 5:30, and I've been sitting waiting for it to start. So I don't know what went on. So I'm so
6:30 CET. It's 5:30 BST. We have no, it has been really difficult for speakers, particularly from BST. It's written there, but it's not clear because, yeah.
I'm so sorry, and that's my fault, not your fault. And I've literally been sat here thinking, oh, it's going to start soon, and yes, and then not. So hello, everybody.
Hey, Charlotte.
It's very nice to be here, and I apologize if I've kept you waiting. So everybody's been introducing themselves, yeah?
Yeah, and we weren't sure what was going to happen, and so we designed a plan B. So maybe this is an opportunity for us to use your restorative justice principles to figure out what's the right thing to do here. But should we continue going around the introductions and then we figure out next steps as a group?
Well, I'll tell you what I was going to offer, and then you can decide based on what I was going to offer, whether you think that what your plan B was, whether that would be more productive for you, or whether you like the idea of what I'm offering. So what I was going to offer was talking through how restorative approaches have moved away from a straightforward restorative justice response, which a lot of people know what restorative justice is, but how the broader principles of restorative approaches can respond to systemic change. And then I was going to go through what those principles are with you, and then maybe do an exercise around the restorative questions and why they offer a different response to the kind of normal way of responding to things when they go wrong. That was my idea for the session. And hello, everybody, I'm Charlotte, and I'm so profoundly sorry and desperately trying to recover, but I think I'm there.
No, we're just so grateful to have you in this space tonight, Charlotte. And please don't think for one moment that, you know, we wouldn't want to have your entire session today. But we'd also like to have a discussion around structural racism as well. Yeah. And so I'm wondering whether we could have Delia center it in racism with a short you know, presentation at the beginning, and then we go into Charlotte's workshop. And so therefore we could be looking at this is actually pointed, looking at restorative justice principles in that context. How does that sound? Well, let me hear from Delia. She's the person I don't want to.
No, I mean, I am flexible, and I definitely think that there is an overlap, because I think my presentation is basically how we can achieve health equity, right? And equity, I know, is definitely one of the principles.
Absolutely.
Of restorative justice.
Yeah.
So I think it should, you know, I can do like an abbreviated version, so just to kind of give people sort of a real life examples of what happens in terms of health outcomes when the system is unbalanced, you know. So
fabulous.
And we can look at restorative justice through that lens, yeah. Shall we continue? I know I'm not facilitating this professionally. I'm not a facilitator, guys, but shall we continue with the introductions?
I think everybody who...
Yeah, so we've got Magda, oh, Lipsa's just joined us. Magda, Lipsa, Earthen, and Lakita still to go, I believe. Shall I nominate Lakita? You're on mute.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lakita.
And I'm really just here to learn a bit more of alternatives, I guess, to how we normally do things. I think we're seeing that things haven't been working, and it'll be good to find a different approach. So yes, and to nominate someone. Sorry, Adam, can you repeat who you said didn't go yet?
Kareem, Magda, and Lipsa.
Oh, Lipsa. So I nominate Lipsa.
Hi. What is there an anchor question that we have?
Just introduce yourself and what brings you here.
Oh, hi, I'm Lipsa. I'm joining from India. What brings me here is that I want to pursue a career in politics, a full-time career in politics some years down the line. And that's why the entire thing of negotiating the new normal is very, very appealing. And I want to understand and want to learn more as how this can translate into our public spaces. And yeah, that's what.
So now it's your turn to nominate someone, Lipsa.
Oh, okay.
So
But how do I can nominate anyone, or is there a list of who hasn't gone?
Just Magda and Kareem to go.
Oh, Kareem. Nominating Kareem.
Thank you, Lipsa. I'm Kareem Arik. I'm based in Amsterdam. I'm a weaver. I call myself a weaver. I have an organization called Weave the Future. And for me, why I show up to this is I've been a facilitator for many years, and I used to talk about safe spaces. Then I started talking about safe and brave spaces, and I'm starting to be at the cusp of wanting to create safe, brave, and healing spaces. And I think those three come together quite nicely, and I'm curious.
Okay. Is that everyone? So what I'm going to do now is I am no longer going to facilitate. I'm going to invite a professional facilitator to continue this meeting to manage as we go forward. Thanks, Adam. Adam.
Have we heard from Magda?
Oh God, sorry.
It's all right. I didn't have much to say. Adam just pulled me out of the shadows. Hi, everyone. I'm Magda Theodate. I'm an international trade attorney and public procurement advisor. And I've been on for a couple of days now, listening and participating and contributing. I'm here at this particular session because I happen to be in the U.S. right now. And for those of you who are in the U.S. and you and others who are paying attention to what's happening in the news, there's a lot going on about police injustices and racial equality or inequality, if you want to call it that, and just a lot of disturbance. And consequently, I think this kind of what we're talking about here and what we're going to talk about during this session is critical if one wishes to be an informed participant and contributor to add value to what's happening right now. So I'm hoping to grow and learn and share as part of this so that I can be someone who adds value to the movement that is happening right now around the world, but particularly here when it comes to ending kind of this brutality that we've seen against vulnerable communities. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Magda. We don't want anybody in the shadows here. Everybody's welcome. Really nice to see familiar names as well from the other sessions coming, and that shows the impact that the Negotiating the New Normal Summit has been having. So we're really looking forward to hearing from Charlotte, who's going to be guiding through the bulk of this session. But first, we're going to hear from Delia about her declaration of racism as a public health crisis. So just to introduce a little bit about Delia, she's a fellow with Research Group on Disparities in Health at Columbia University. And she's also a consultant and entrepreneur based in Brooklyn, New York. So also in the US, Magda. In many places around the world, the current coronavirus pandemic has affected the health of people of color at a vastly disproportionate rate. I think we're all aware of that. So how much has that helped reveal about racism and how that determines health outcomes? So Delia has over 15 years experience in the field of health, and she's going to now declare racism as a public health crisis. Go ahead, Delia.
Thank you, Adam. So let me just jump right into it. If white Americans in the US were dying, if Black Americans actually were dying at the same rate as white Americans from COVID-19, as of September 15th, roughly something like 21,000 Black Americans would still be alive, which is just a lot, because that's like 21,000 mothers, grandmothers, fathers, just like a lot of love that has been taken away from families from COVID-19, right? It's like 1 in 1,020 Black Americans have died from COVID-19. And when you compare it to whites, it's like 1 in 2,150. So we see just serious disparities. And when we look and we say, okay, maybe it's something because of being African, there's some genetic something at play. We look at the death rates from COVID in the continent, and we see that Africa has like roughly like 17% of the world's population. But in terms of reported COVID death, it's like 3.5%. So the numbers just are not on the same level. So in the US, the people who are dying from COVID-19, it's basically African Americans, Latinos, and indigenous people, Native Americans. And while in the UK, the people who are dying at the highest rate from COVID are members of the so-called, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups. They have had the highest death rates. So what we are seeing in the COVID-19 death rates is a familiarity in patterns, right? So anyone who has been working in public health or in health disparities, we know these numbers, and we see this. We see these patterns. So we see that what has happened is that the same traditionally marginalized population groups are also overrepresented in COVID-19 deaths. So we can ask the question, as I have alluded to, is it because of their race that they are predisposed to die from COVID? Or is it the impact of racism that increases the risk of dying from COVID-19 deaths, of COVID-19? The evidence, I think, it seems to suggest that it may not be one's race, right, that is putting one at risk for death from COVID, but it is the practice of racism, that they have to deal with in their daily lives. There was a report from Public Health England, which was an official inquiry. And it concluded, and I quote here, that racism and discrimination suffered by Britain's Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people has contributed to the high death rates from COVID-19 in those communities. The report also goes on to say that racism and discrimination experienced by these Black, Asian, and minority key workers is a root cause affecting health and exposure risk for these communities. Racism is a form of systemic oppression. And what it does, it targets members of the so-called outgroups in different communities and societies, right? And we have recognized that these systems of oppression, like racism, they actually represent a threat to civilization, right? If we just have to go back to World War II and see how this whole concept of anti-Semitism in Nazi Germany literally almost destroyed Europe. So after World War II, the UN, under their Human Rights Charter, there was the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and that declared, rightly so, that any doctrine of superiority based on racial differentiation is scientifically false, morally condemnable, socially unjust, and dangerous, and there's no justification for racial discrimination in theory or in practice. But I mean, as a lot of you who have worked with the UN, we understand that the UN often there's a kind of difference in the idealized version of something and the practice of it, right? Because I am sure we can all think back to post-1965, where there have been instances of war and death linked to one's racial or ethnic affiliation. We can look at Rwanda and the Bosnian conflict as some recent examples. And what they actually do is underscore that one's race or ethnicity, due to the systemic practice of oppression, right, can increase your probability of death or injury. And when we take it back to COVID-19, we see that what is happening is that systems of oppression are actually antecedents of health inequity and disparities. So, I mean, I've been doing research with vulnerable communities in the States for, like Adam said, about 15 years. And initially, when I was just getting into it, it was like, African Americans are more susceptible to this. And, it's basically what was put forward was that one's race made them susceptible. But there has been a change over the last 5 or so years where people are saying, hey, it's not about the race anymore, right? What is happening is that the practice of racism, it's creating a particular environment, right, that is putting one at risk for poor health outcomes. And in the US, racism is American as apple pie, right? So I just want to take a quick couple of seconds here and just do a kind of definition of racism so we will all be on the same table, right? So racism is basically something that is like on different levels. You have institutional or structural racism, which are basically societal systems and institutional policies that produce racially biased results. A quick example, if you have an exam for individuals who are both left-handed and right-handed, and one part of the exam is oral and one part is written, left-handed people do better on the oral part of the exam, right-handed people do better on the written, but you weigh the oral part of the exam heavier in your decision making. So you are producing biased results for left-handers, right? And then you have personally mediated racism, which I think a lot of us are familiar with. That's your racial and your ethnic slurs. And that's bias that you will have against a particular group on a personal level. And then internalized racism. This is where the members of the out group or the stigmatized group, they actually accept these negative messages that come from the dominant culture about themselves. And what is particularly harmful is when you have this integration of institutional racism, meaning someone who has power, who can wield power, and is personally biased against a member of a marginalized group. So that is particularly puts a person in a vulnerable position if they're already in a vulnerable community. And we can see that African Americans, because again, I'm speaking from a US-based perspective, right? That they encounter all different types of racism in their lives. And we see that there's a growing consensus that systemic oppression in the form of anti-Black racism represents a threat to the health of Black Americans. And this is why I am declaring, and a whole lot of other scholars and researchers are declaring, that racism be declared a public health emergency, with the understanding that racism faced by minorities act as a persistent stressor in their lives. Now, just quick little bit of biology, just keep it brief. So, I mean, the human body is amazing, and we have a natural stress response system, which is the HPA axis, right? And it's really there to deal with acute or short-term stress, fight or flight, you know, you're in the jungle and the lion comes and you're able to respond, you know, as best. The body releases hormones and all of that crazy stuff, and you deal with the crisis because it's acute, it's short-term, and then homeostasis kicks back in, right? And you go back to a normal level of these hormones in your blood. But what happens is that when you're under acute or chronic stress, this HPA axis, what happens, it fails to work as designed, and an HPA axis abnormality develops, right? So frequently repeated or chronic environmental stress causes this dysfunction. And the chronic stress, it alters biological responses in a manner that increases the risk for chronic disease, right? So we have increased, yeah.
Sorry, Delia, this is absolutely wonderful. Just because we're pressed for time, and I hate to do it, but are you able to bring it to a conclusion?
Definitely. So so this extra extra cortisol levels increases the risk of diabetes, stroke, and obesity. So basically we have a chronic inflammatory response. COVID-19 is basically a chronic inflammatory disease. So what I am saying is that what we need to deal with this new, not just to recognize that racism is a public health emergency, we need health equity. I think that is the way for us to go forward. And what that looks like, it is the assurance of the conditions for the optimal health of all people. And I think that kind of puts it in a nutshell.
It absolutely does. Thank you so much for raising your voice on the issue. And like you've said before, like one of the major tragedies of what we've been going through over the last 6 or 7 months is that a lot of the people who are on the front line are people who are Black and brown, and they're the healthcare workers, care workers, health professionals, people on the front line who have been disproportionately affected by this. Just before we go to Charlotte, really itching to pass the mic over to you, Charlotte, I just want to give people a really, really, really brief period of time to respond if you feel called to say something in response to Delia's declaration of racism as a health crisis. No problem. If you don't, if you're still absorbing it. Okay, let me bring in Charlotte then. A little later than scheduled, but we're negotiating the new normal, and technical problems and time zone problems, it's all part of negotiating the new normal. So if you weren't here earlier or you want to recap, Charlotte is a director of the Restorative Engagement Forum. And so she's a champion of restorative practice, and not just when it comes to crime, so not only in prisons, but also in the workplace and in schools. And it's my pleasure to hand over to Charlotte for the last 50 minutes or so of this session. Go ahead, Charlotte. Thank you.
And thank you, Delia, very much for what you said. It is incredibly interesting and quite hard to follow, to be totally honest, because I don't feel equipped to comment on it, and because other than to share your views, but I certainly can't add to the debate because you discussed it so richly and beautifully. And I was trying to think about the restorative response to everything that you were discussing. And how I work is I used to work in the field of restorative justice at the beginning. So for years, I worked bringing harmers and harmed people together to have conversations in the criminal justice system. So my job was to have those conversations, which is where everybody thinks restorative justice lies. Most people who I discuss restorative justice with, they think that it's two people having a conversation. And for me now, that's not really how I'm working. I'm working because if we think that most organizations aspire to live by their cultures and their values, and then create structures and systems to support those cultures and values, ideally, we are looking for the people within those organizations or wherever we happen to be living or working to behave in ways that respond to that. However, that doesn't happen. And so what we're doing when we work restoratively is we're trying to encourage everyone to create climates where how people behave towards each other responds to the culture and values that they're trying to create, and then create the systems and structures that support that. So it's the other way around to the way that people usually work. So how do we do that? How do we move away from the usual response? One of the things that Delia said at the beginning was how her work was aligned, and I agree, was about fair process. And when we work restoratively, we work with fair process. We work in prisons nowadays in the UK, they call it procedural justice. And procedural justice is moving away from the old-fashioned response to what happens when things go wrong. So if I was to say to you all now, if something goes wrong and the first question people ask is what happened, what's the second question that people ask? Why? Why?
Who's to blame?
Thank you. Who's to blame? That's the second question. So it's really interesting because in the old system we have what's happened, the thing that's gone wrong. So people refer in schools that I work in where young people are marginalized and they've been kicked out of mainstream school and they've been put in alternative education and frequently windows are smashed. The first question after what's happened, the window's broken. The second question, who's to blame? That's the way people go, Libby, you're absolutely right. Who's to blame and why? And of course, the natural result of that is that we end up thinking, how are we going to sanction people? How are we going to sanction people? If we start with what happened, goes to who's to blame and why, we end up with how are we going to sanction them? So we don't work like that when we work restoratively. When we work restoratively, we ask different questions. And those different questions create entirely different responses. I've been part of a big conversation around the world for the last 5 weeks on the relationship between restorative justice and social justice. And we ended up thinking that maybe this is a quiet revolution. Maybe this is a quiet revolution, one person at a time, because it starts with me. It starts with me having different conversations and creating the kind of debate that is less polarized than the usual debate that happens. And if we ask different questions to what's happened, who's to blame, and how are we going to sanction them, we might end up having different conversations. So when we work restoratively, we work with what's happened, what's the impact, and what needs to happen next. So I'm going to tell you a story from Colombia, where I worked last year. And I worked with 50 young people who'd just been released from detention for the most serious crimes that you can commit. And the reason why they'd been released is because in Colombia, you get 3 years for homicide. And so if you're under the age of 18, so the gangs often recruit young people to commit the homicides because they get sentenced less. And so a lot of these people were coming out of prison aged 19 or 20, having served 3 years for very serious crimes in very non-rehabilitative environments. And the city of Cali, which has got a very high crime rate, it's a very dangerous city in Colombia, came up with a very innovative project, which was to rehabilitate these young people back into their community using restorative principles. And so it offered a range of programs that were all underpinned by a restorative ethos. And I've been joined by a dog. Hello, darling. So I'm going to go through the 5 restorative principles with you. And I worked with them for about 15 months to embed a restorative ethos into working with these 50 young people. And I'm just going to tell you a quick story about something that happened when I went back in January. One of the key workers wanted to tell me about how he'd responded restoratively to a situation and check in with me he'd done it right. I said, not only have you done it really well, but I'm going to write up about it when I go home because it's one of the most beautiful examples of restorative I've seen. So basically he got home after day 3 of working with these young people, and he looked at his phone and he had received some really abusive and threatening messages from one person in the group. Okay. So he goes in the next day and he calls a restorative circle. And he sits them all down and he gets out his phone. He goes, last night I received some messages on my phone that were really abusive and threatening and hostile. And the whole room goes like this. Because they're waiting for him to go, who did it? Who sent them? And he didn't. He sat and he told them the impact on him of receiving these messages. And then he said, so I think I've started on the wrong foot with some of you. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to find out from you how we can work better together. And he went round the circle and invited them all to speak and got to one young lad who was very hard to work with. He was difficult and he had had a very challenging upbringing. And he said, actually, I sent them and I'm sorry. And I shouldn't have. And I was going through various stuff and And as a result, he just talked about it and then came up with some ideas. So he gets to the end of the circle and David's told me this story and I'm thinking, we have so many wins here. We have so many wins. Not only have you got who did it, okay? You've got who did it. Doesn't matter. Not only have you got someone being accountable, you've also got someone showing remorse. Okay? So you've got accountability, you've got remorse, which you didn't even ask for. And you've also got better ways of working together. And you've also built trust and you've built rapport and you've given everybody a voice. And you've created a space where people feel safe because there was no shame and no blame involved. And when we work restoratively, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create climates where there is no shame and no blame. And one of the, I'm very interested in what Brene Brown says about vulnerability. She says people get vulnerability wrong. They think that in order to be vulnerable, you have to be in environments that are trusting. But actually, the trust doesn't come first. What we have to do is have the conversations and then you create the trust. It's the other way around. And that's what we do when we work restoratively. So I'm going to be a little dull now and I'm going to write up what the 5 principles are on my flip chart because I don't like PowerPoint. I like using a pen. So I'm going to write them down. Okay, what are these restorative principles that we're talking? Preferably a pen that works, always helps. There's lots, don't worry, we'll find one. That one's better.
And you're left-handed, wow.
Yeah, left-handed. What are these restorative principles that we're talking about? And the first one, as Delia said, is fair process. Let's have a look at what happened when the law came in the 12th century in the UK. In the 11th century, if I stole one of Margaret Rose's chickens, because we lived in the same village together, you as the community were invested in us sorting it out. You wanted us to sort it out right, because we lived in a community and it benefited you as a community if Margaret Rose and I sorted out the chicken situation. However, Margaret Rose and I could go off and take this half of my computer and she could take that half of my computer and we could create gang warfare. We could do that. But ultimately what we would really like is for you, the community, to support us to resolve what is essentially our conflict. When the law came in, we've got Adam and Lakita and Yolanda who become the law. And I'm not anti the law, but what I am anti is some of the consequences of the law. And some of those consequences are things like this. Margaret has become a witness, not a victim, and her voice has not become relevant unless it is to serve the law. It doesn't matter whether I take accountability. It's not like the young lad in Colombia who chose to take accountability. I will only take accountability if I think that you haven't got enough evidence against me, because suddenly the whole dynamic has changed. We're talking about right or wrong. We're talking about right or wrong. But you know what really worries me about the old system, as I call it, is that we start to rely on other people to make our decisions for us. And I really think that actually most of what happens in the world falls in the gray areas. It falls in the bits in between right or wrong. And actually maybe restorative can respond to those gray areas where there's more than one opinion and there's lots of different perspectives. And maybe all those perspectives need to be valued to come up with solutions. And maybe we need to give people their voices back to have those kind of conversations in a richer and more dynamic way with fair process. Fair process was broken down by some very clever guys from Harvard who said that it's a combination of engagement, explanation, and expectation clarity. And I think that's the problem, is that we quite often do the engagement bit. We rarely get here. We rarely get to expectation clarity. People rarely know what it is that they need to be doing as a result. So I'm not saying that there shouldn't be consequences to actions, but I should say they should be, I am saying they should be exclusive, they should inclusive, explained, and have expectation clarity, because then people will buy into them. What's the thing that children say the most? 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, what do they say the most?
No, or why?
Why?
Or it's not fair.
It's not fair, yeah.
It's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair. People don't mind consequences to actions. They just want them to be fair. They want them to be fair. So we need to create systems where fair process is happening. The second restorative principle that we work with is we give everybody a voice. And the critical thing about giving people a voice is in a no shame and no blame environment. And I work a lot with how to create no shame, no blame environments. Non-hierarchical, no shame, no blame environments. I work in systems that are hierarchical, they're vertical. And my job is to create a horizontal communication platform within vertical organizations. That's my job. I want to give everybody a voice within this structure. And then you can create a lovely circle. Okay? So this might sound as if I am talking pie in the sky and I am talking of some wonderful utopia. Let me tell you, the most restorative places I've been to in the UK are a primary school in inner city Manchester and a prison holding maximum security lifers. They're the two most restorative places in the UK that I've been to. And I've been in hundreds of places doing this work across all sorts of environments and elite sport and health and healthcare and hospices and schools and education and prisons and banks and goodness knows where. And those two places are the most restorative places I've been in. How did they create that? How did they create a place where you give everybody a voice in a no shame, no blame environment? You create fair process and you encourage accountability, which is what happened when David held his circle. Fair process, voice, accountability, and using the restorative questions, which we've already been through. We've moved away from what happened, who's to blame, and how can we punish them, into what happened, What's the impact? And what do we need to do to heal the harm and move forward? And the fifth thing we do in a restorative culture is we work with people. And I think it's a very overused phrase, but working with people is about moving away from doing things to people or doing things for people. We work with them, and it's harder work, and it takes longer, and it creates an invested community. And that's how I can walk into a place and know how restorative it is, because you can just tell. You can walk into a classroom, which is a 2 classroom, because a 2 classroom is where the teacher's standing at the front and everybody's mute. And those who aren't behaving are being kicked out. A 4 classroom is where you go in and the teacher's at the front, a harried mess, stressed out to the max. A with classroom is where you go in and you don't even know where the teacher is, because everybody is so invested. You're looking around, where's the teacher? Because everybody's getting on with their job. Everybody's invested. Everybody's on task. Because they can be, because they know why they're there. They have agency. They're accountable. They have a voice. Somebody's stuck. That's where the teacher's is. The teacher's with the person who's stuck, helping them move forward. So that's what we're creating when we create a restorative culture. And I'm now being asked to go into communities specifically around issues surrounding Black Lives Matter and Me Too. And I think this is really interesting. The last 5 contracts that I have been given have been around those 2 issues, because people are saying, we are not happy with the alternatives within our communities. They are too simplistic. And we need to offer more nuanced responses to people who are at the receiving end of racial conflict, or who are at the receiving end of sexual harassment. We need to offer more options, more conversations, and more ways of healing the harm and resolving the tensions than the alternatives that we've currently got. And that's why my work is becoming more and more, well, it's exploding, would not be a kind of, it's exploding, it's going bonkers. And I think it's because people are finding that the traditional responses have been too, they just lack the nuance that's needed for people to have the kind of conversations and dialogue that need to be happening. Okay, I've spoken for 20 minutes, and I don't particularly like speaking for more than 20 minutes because I think that's enough time. I really would like to invite some dialogue around this. And I've got a million stories. I've got a million exercises I could do with you. My takeaway I wanted you to have from this session is the restorative questions, the what happened, what's the impact, and how do we move forward? That's all I really wanted you to take away. Because frankly, if you can take that away and you can do that, how you communicate you, how I have a conversation with Adam, how I create a circle with all of us, or how I have a dialogue with 2 people who've experienced harm.
Okay, so Charlotte, I'm just listening to you through the lens of my week.
Yes.
Health equity, right? Yes. So if I have, let's say we have someone who is an African-American mother.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have these disparate outcomes, right? So a college-educated Black woman, we have higher infant and maternal mortality rates than high school educated, right? Yeah. So this happens, this woman has a poor experience in a hospital environment. Yeah. Like, how would you, like, the hospital calls you and say, we have a problem?
Beautiful example. So one of my favorite pieces of work I did was I brought about 1,000 police officers together with about 600 police officers around the UK with about 1,000 young people, young offenders from marginalized backgrounds. Not a dissimilar situation. Somebody who feels they've got very little power against someone who they think's got a lot of power. And we held circles to give everybody a voice in that environment. And I think that if you create a space where people feel safe to have a voice and be heard, the inequality and the lack of power that people are feeling and the powerlessness bizarrely evaporates. Now, the interesting thing when I held those circles was not one of them I ever had to do a timeout. Not one of them did any of the young people in those circles break the guidelines for the circle, not once, because they knew this was their opportunity to have their voice and be listened to, and they wanted to take it and they wanted to create a change. I think if you give people a space where they know they're going to be heard and they know that action will happen as a result, that will give them the power that they currently feel they lack. So I hope that answers it by giving an example with the young people and the police.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Just kind of bringing people together and changing power dynamics allows in that space.
Yeah.
You know, there's a shift.
Yeah.
And hopefully that shift could be translated into policy, you know?
Well, I think more than hopefully. I've got a little bit kind of directive about this now. I won't hold circles for people unless I think some change is going to happen. So if I don't feel that the outcomes of the circle are actually going to translate into systemic change. So for example, one of the counties I worked in, stop and search is a big thing in the UK, and particularly against there's a lot of the people I had in these circles, and they were most of them were around stop and search with young Black and Asian men primarily, who had been victims of stop and search unfairly, and they wanted to talk about it. Now what happens is, and this was written up in The Guardian, as a result of those circles, if a stop and search happens and someone complains, the police officer is invited, inverted commas, to take part in a restorative conversation with the young person who feels that it was inappropriate. Because they want to give people their voice to share their experience. So I do think that they have to result in some kind of structural change, systemic change, rather than just be, I mean, I think the importance of reclaiming your voice and having your power matters, but I think it has to be followed up by something else as well. I think both matter. Lakita.
We've got a good 25 minutes here, so let's live by the fifth principle, work with. Let's not look for the teacher, let's all be the teachers, let's all be the participants. So Lakita, I think you wanted to jump in. I think Libby's got a question as well. It'd be nice to hear from Libby, but go ahead, Lakita.
Okay, so I agree with that. But one of my questions would be, and specific to Trinidad and Tobago, when you have people in certain positions of power, it tends to become artificial. So even if you bring them into that space, I think, or maybe just in general, anyone with that power, if it's just to have a conversation, it's easy for you to just have a conversation. It's the same way when you have a political campaign and they are the humblest of people, and then they get in and it completely changes. So my question then is, how do you ensure that that leads to structural change after? So where they acknowledge it in this space and they say, okay, yes, I see what you're saying. How do we ensure that thereafter that change is actually implemented? Because we're still going to have to, especially when it comes to a political or legal system, we can't just destroy it in that one session. So they're going to be going back into that system. How do we make that shift that even though they're going back into the system, they're going in with a different mindset, and they're going in to propel or motivate others to actually work on dismantling the system or aspects of it that are producing injustice?
I totally agree with you. I mean, one of the things that in the organizations I work in now, I'm just going to do an aside about how restorative justice has worked in schools, and all the research and the evidence shows this, that if you do restorative justice as a little add-on bolt-on in the pastoral care department, it gets drowned in a generally punitive culture, and it becomes actually a part of sanctions, and it doesn't work. However, I mean, last year we trained 4,000 people. We trained everybody from the ladies and men who worked at the reception desk through to the head teacher, through to every single child in the school. I won't work with organizations now who won't put their senior leadership team through the training in the same way. I'm not interested. Because you're absolutely right. Unless everybody is willing to participate at the same level in this kind of conversation and training and reshift their relationship with each other, it's just this, and that I'm not, yeah, I completely agree with you. And it's very easy to walk into a circle and go, wow, I've really heard you, and then wander off. And I'm not happy about that. No, I totally agree with you. And so I've got quite ballsy, for want of a better word, about who I work with. I mean, one of the big organizations who I'm working with, who are very involved with dishing out the law, and I'm going to be that discreet. Actually, I said I wouldn't work with them unless they got the Director General involved, which they did. Because I said, if you're serious about this, then everybody gets involved. And so I totally agree with you, Lakita. You cannot just have it as the nice little thing you do on the side. We'll do that restorative thing just over here, but it won't actually really impact on everything as a whole. I see it like the oil that oils the wheels and cogs of the machinery of systems, but everybody has to participate in that.
So Charlotte, I'm just curious, do you have like hard data to support like what were the trends, what was happening, like the hard counts, and then you go in, you do your intervention, and you know, what happens post?
Well, one of the organizations that we're working with, we've got some really interesting data just come out. We've been working with them for 2 years, and they've turned their whole organization restorative. And they had a really interesting response to how they came out of lockdown and COVID-19. Actually, I loved what they did. They held restorative circles from the whole organization. Everybody took part in one, and they were all fed back to the senior leadership team, and everybody heard, everybody bore witness to what everyone else's experience had been, and took the learning and took the issues. We've been collecting the data on that. So for example, grievances, which are a big issue in organizations and frankly don't work. You know, I don't know whether anybody's been a part of an HR department, but grievances don't work. Everybody just ends up cross. And they've reduced by 60% in a year. So that's one of the outcomes that we've got from that organization, which I think is pretty good, hard data. There's a bunch of others, but and the evidence in schools is wonderful, but it has to be whole system implementation. It can't just be a little bolt-on add-on. It doesn't work. Libby, you were nodding when I said that about education. So I'm wondering what your background is.
Oh, I have a background in HR. I was administrative law judge in an internal grievance system in a state employee, a merit system in the state of Colorado. And we introduced the mediation step at step 2 and resolved a lot of the grievances that way. But my larger question is to Delia's point and your explanation of how to get the entire organization shifted to a restorative justice process and mindset. Delia is dealing with a subset of patients within the United States of America. So say the hospital goes through this process, and all the patients and all the staff and all the administration, and in that little section of, I don't know, is it Brooklyn? you know, is converted to restorative justice, and then they move out into greater New York City. Well,
I couldn't agree with you more.
Go and go and go and go and go.
Yeah. So actually, one of the sad things about that beautiful primary school in Manchester, which is so restorative and has created such wonderful young people leaving at 11, is that they go on to non-restorative secondary schools. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's tough. And that's why when we were talking about it on this big international call where we had people from Nigeria and South Africa and University of Washington and UK and Europe and all over the place, from my perspective, I believe, for me, the only way I can do it is a quiet revolution, one institution at a time. That's all I can do. And one hopes that the ripple effect of watching the cultural change will start to create an interesting lens that people will want to mirror and model. One of the things that I think is really interesting, Libby, is that when you start introducing this culture, a lot of people don't like it. And the reason they don't like it is because they don't like losing power, and because they don't want to be accountable. Actually, they don't. And so quite a lot of things that happen when you start introducing, people think this is the pink and fluffy approach. It is so not. It's actually the antithesis. This is all about rigorous challenge. And actually, some people don't like that at all. And so they shape up or ship out. Because if you're not aligned with the values and the culture, which requires high accountability, autonomy, agency, and independence of thinking and thought and involvement in your community, people don't want to do that sometimes. So it's quite an interesting thing when you do this, because you butt up against some interesting dynamics, and it shines a lens on the areas of the organization which are not aligned to the values and the culture. So that's interesting in itself.
So how do you get those powerful people into the space? Or is that something you have to depend on them to, or wait for them to realize is a good thing for them?
Well, I had one COO who left because he said, I'm a dinosaur. He said, I'm a dinosaur and I can't change, but I know this is the way that the organization needs to go. I can't do it. I find it too difficult. Which I thought was very brave, actually. And he was absolutely right. He wasn't aligned with where the organization wanted to take itself. And he was very much old school, sort of what happened, who's to blame, and how are we going to punish them? That was his response to how you dealt with stuff. And it was very hierarchical, and it was very power and command and control based. And it wasn't aligned with where the organization wanted to go, so he left. The problem is some other poor organization inherited him.
Oh, go ahead, Amanda. Don't wait for permission. Just jump in.
Yeah, just,
sorry.
Just jump in.
Delia and Charlotte. Oh, I'm sorry, Amanda. I thought you said Magda. Sorry.
Sorry, there are just a couple of things that this discussion is bringing to mind, and these are more systemic, but I'm thinking about how this idea applies to medical malpractice. And,
perfect.
If we could have a gentler approach, because I understand the rage and the fury. There's this, you want someone to blame. So I'm seeing, well, you want someone to blame if there's someone to blame, but there's a lot of, it ties back to what is justice and what do we really want. And I think it creates defensiveness, and it creates really high premiums, and it creates maybe even wrong practice and expensive practice, because instead of doing the right thing, we're doing defensive practice. We're literally trying to run a medical system to prevent litigation.
Yeah,
and
so I mean, it's deny and defend, isn't it? Deny and defend is the general policy. And I've done a medical malpractice circle during lockdown, actually, interestingly. you know, the evidence shows that actually victims of harm, survivors of harm, people who've been at the receiving end of harm, the majority, punishment is not necessarily what they want. What they want is for it to not happen again. And that's very different. So in medical malpractice, the majority of people want it to not happen to anybody else. That is different to punishing the person. And I think if we were to adopt that mindset, restorative is in perfect alignment. Yeah. It's less about getting your pound of flesh and more about not wanting it to happen again. And how can we create that? And also people want to be heard. I did a very big public inquiry in the UK that was about to go to 5 lawsuits, which I only found out last week, and I did it about 3 years ago. I'm jolly grateful they didn't tell me that. And they came in and they had, let me find, they had this 86-page booklet of what had gone wrong. I remember it as being 86 pages of what had gone wrong. And they were expecting to sit and discuss that, right? They were expecting to sit and discuss, this is what went wrong, how are we going to put it right? And I went, actually, I'm not interested in what went wrong because you will know what went wrong. So we're going to put that down, and I just want to know how you were impacted. This is the second most expensive police inquiry that took place in the UK. How were you impacted? We did 5 hours because no one had ever asked them. No one had ever asked them that question. And what I found out last week was every single lawsuit was dropped. Because actually what they wanted was to have their voice. That's what they really needed. And then look at how you need to make it better. And that's, it just shifts the importance of the conversation. And that's why I think it's so important for medical malpractice. I just think it's a much more constructive conversation than the ones that normally have of deny and defend. Has that answered that at all, Amanda?
Yeah, that was really, really an exciting response, because while it had occurred to me, you've actually experienced it and you can tell a story about how it worked. And that was, I really enjoyed that. The other thing that comes to mind is how we feel about climate justice right now and our demand to sanction the fossil fuel companies. And I think right now the conversation is very adversarial, and maybe I understand how angry we are with them, but maybe we can shift the conversation in such, if only we could get them on board, if we could all be on the same side. That's, I don't know, ambitious, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting about this, you know, there's a lot of conversation about finding our tribe and whatever. And one of the things I love about Matthew Syed's book, Rebel Ideas, is actually maybe we shouldn't be. Maybe we should be having conversations that are far more complex with people who are outside them. And maybe we should be using restorative methods to have those conversations to create a far more dynamic dialogue.
At this point, can I encourage Magda to ask her very exciting question?
Sorry, Magda.
I didn't think it was so exciting, but thank you. Essentially, I'll make it short. I just want to understand what is the best time and who are the best institutions and or leaders and or people to introduce restorative justice principles and or, you know, bring restorative justice to the forefront when dealing in communities that are simmering with pain, anger right now, simmering with violence, communities that, like in Seattle, where they've just experienced riots, or in where George Floyd died. I mean, who should be doing this? Should it be municipalities contacting Delia and contacting you, Charlotte? I mean, should it be business associations? You know, I'm kind of tired of seeing it led by churches in America.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So sure. I'd love to get some comment on that from both of you, please.
A great question. Absolutely great question. Firstly, I'd love it if we start calling this restorative practice or restorative approaches rather than restorative justice, because I think the word justice puts some people off. And I think that it's important that we use a term that is more holistic and invites people into the conversation. Secondly, that is a wonderful question, because when people are very, very angry and upset, these kind of conversations, I mean, my work in restorative justice is the sharp end. So I do homicide, sexual harm, child sexual harm. Those are the only cases I do now. I do the absolute toughest cases, right? And you're absolutely right. There is when we're dealing with massive amounts of trauma and often massive amounts of shame, which have been triggered alongside that for all parties, timing is absolutely critical. So I don't think in those kind of situations it should ever be rushed. I think a lot of preparation work needs to be done. I think people who are skilled and knowing how to do this, it must not be done in those kind of situations by amateurs. It's too skilled, it's too complex, it's too nuanced. It needs to be multi-agency working, Magda. So you need to have all the partnerships who are involved with supporting healing these communities involved with it. And ideally, you have somebody who takes the restorative lead, who will work with everybody to bring the communities together. We did a piece of work in England after the Brexit vote. There was a murder of a Polish man by a group of teenagers in Harlow in Essex in a shopping centre, and we did a big piece of work there to heal the community, working with the young people who'd done it and shopkeepers and the Polish community and everybody. And it takes time, and it needs multi-agency partnerships working on it. Does that answer?
Okay. It does. It does. I'd love to hear from Delia on it as well. Thank you, Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
Delia, you're muted.
I know. That's the joke. Yeah. Definitely bringing together all the stakeholders. Mm. But I also think we have to have like a big tent, and maybe other ideas will creep in as well. It may not always be restorative practices, but just any idea that brings people together and recognizes the humanity and our interconnectedness is the beginning.
Totally.
And it is hard work. It's not easy because we would have figured it out already. Totally. And just commitment to the work of restoring communities and moving forward. So just bringing everybody together, recognizing that there may be new and innovative ways other than what we know, and a commitment to the process.
Thank you. But just a follow up, if I may, who should be leading though? Charlotte, maybe you were going to speak about that. I don't know, but I would like to understand that because that's a big issue here in the US. Who leads this thing? And because that determines not only who has agency to lead it, but its legitimacy. So it's important to get that, if I may.
And Delia, where I really agree with you, what we're doing is we're providing the space. So Dominic Barter and his work in the favelas in Brazil uses all restorative principles, but it's not just restorative. There's what comes out of it. We're just providing the framework. You guys provide the content. Yeah. We provide the framework, you provide the content. And what solutions comes out of the content? Who knows? So, but where we're lucky, Magda, in the UK, for example, is that we are funded in every county for a restorative wing as part of the police. So there is a restorative arm in every county who can hold these spaces. We're very lucky to have these, and people aren't using them enough. We should be having more of these dialogues around the fallout from Brexit and everything else, using the facilities that are already within communities as part of. It's 42 million doled out by the police and crime commissioners, government to the police and crime commissioners every year, and that goes on restorative practice.
And I know the issue with the States is that it's not one country. It's very regional, as you would know, Magda, because you live here. So depending on the political persuasion of the county leaders, they would see certain things as being beneficial and others not, and that may not align with that restorative practice. Mm-hmm. So in terms of who are the people to come forward, I think the people who are impacted, right? Mm-hmm. And I think one of the cons of America is that people who are impacted are led to believe that this is just a system and they cannot do anything. So I think education and you know, to those who are impacted, to let them know that they do have a voice, and I think that that will be an initial stage in deciding leadership, when they realize, hey, I'm impacted. This is affecting me. So what can I do? You know, that kind of thing.
Thank you both very much.
You're welcome.
Short question on this topic of racial justice in the United States. I feel these kind of approaches really fit in the transition from protest to power, right? So you have this eruption, and you have this momentum and pent up energy in the system, and it just comes out over the last after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all the other young men and women. You spoke of agency, and I think it's leaders helping, leaders in the movement helping, if they have these kind of approaches available, helping their community to start having these processes that foster agency, foster a voice in community, yeah. So I'm really inspired. I think yeah, it's like, how can we?
Kareem. Thank you, Kareem. I just wanted to respect that on the hour people have got to be elsewhere, so we've literally got seconds of Charlotte's precious time left.
Well, I loved what Kareem just said about the transition from protest to power. I've written it down, and it's a statement that I will promptly use. So thank you for that, because I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you.
Well, look where we've come to. You know, you start these sessions not knowing what's to come, and you end them.
Certainly when you don't have a blooming facilitator.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. It has been really eye-opening for all of us, and it's fit so well with the Structural Peace Lab and the plans we've had for it. And it's part of the whole mixture of things that is going to lead us at the end of it to come out with it inspired to actually take action in the real world. So I really appreciate that. There's Lipsa had a question, but we do need to go now. So is there any way that people
can stay on if Lipsa wanted to ask it to me? I'm happy to stay on because I was late. So if anybody wants to stay on and ask me a question, I don't know whether that's against protocol, but I'm very happy to do that.
I think that you can. I will have to leave because there's another session that I have to moderate, but anyone who wants to stay on with Charlotte can, because, yeah.
Because I was late and I'm sorry.
No,
well, shall we say then? Those who have to go, but then we'll give it 10 more minutes. So 1:10, so we can hear more from Kareem if he wanted to expand further on what he introduced, and also give Lipsa an opportunity as well to put forward her point.
Great. Thank you so much, Charlotte.
Thank you, Margaret Rose. Really lovely.
Maybe just so everybody knows what's going on the other stage, maybe you have that available?
Yes.
Adam?
So I've just been in conversation about that, because Margaret said she thought that it might be happening tomorrow. But Alyssa, are you aware if that thing on the other stage is happening now?
I will unmute myself. This is the link I've just put the link in the chat to stage 2, and I will double check that is actually happening. So we can carry on here, because this is the last event for today on this stage, and I will give you confirmation very shortly if that session on stage 2 is actually in progress.
Brilliant, thanks Alyssa. And if you wanted to know, that session is Ego, Empathy and Embracing Trauma-Informed Practice for Lawyers. So there's another real big overlap there, just like we had with Delia.
Very overlappy.
Yeah. Okay, continue where we were. Let's keep the momentum.
So Kareem.
I'd love to, yeah, please. Enormously inspired. Of course, as a facilitator, I'm interested in approaches, and I did not know this approach yet, and I'm a big fan of deep democracy. Just getting into it has a lot of similarities in at least giving everyone a voice. I guess where I was curious to take it is, can we use this not only as an inspiration for the organizations we go back to, or the situations we find ourselves in, whether it be a movement, whether it be an organization, etc. But can we use it to negotiate the new normal, I guess?
Oh, totally.
And I wonder, because you said, like, I love that point of expanding our tribe, or actually, you know, we're all one tribe. That's how I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but I might describe it in that way. And to negotiate, when we chose, or when Margaret gave the direction and chose this word of negotiating the new normal, it was really about bringing all different diverse perspectives to the table, and finding common ground, and transcending, maybe, because maybe in the middle it's really hard to find common ground, but if we can transcend that, we can get to a new normal, if you will. So I just wonder, maybe how, okay, maybe the question is, how might we bring this into our emergent communities of practice, where we're forming communities around racial justice, we're forming communities around data surveillance and privacy? How might we negotiate with this practice? Where do we start? How does it look? Where does it end? How long is this process? Should we continuously be doing it, or is it like you do a couple of these sessions and you move on to other approaches? Just how does it look like in practice, and can we adopt that as a community even?
Yeah, I think you start with circles, and I think there are various ways of holding circles, and then I think there, you know, I know how I hold circles. There are other people who've written books around holding circles. There are, you know, wonderful books around bringing people together in sort of human connection, you know, and actually ultimately all we're doing is we're humanizing each other to each other. That's all we're doing. And when that shift happens, then everything changes. I don't know why, but it just does. And I've witnessed that by watching a girl meet the man who murdered her father and end up the session showing him pictures of her kids in 45 minutes. But it did take me a year to bring them together. Yeah.
Just to confirm,
that is how you start. Sorry, Adam.
Sorry, Charlotte. Just to confirm, for anybody that did want to go to that other session, it is underway on stage 2. So don't worry about offending us if you disappear.
Oh no, I'm cool about it. But I did want to hear Lipsa's question as well. Circles is the way to go, Kareem, and get in touch with me, and we can, you know, and you know, that I've got all sorts of docs on circles and books and resources and whatever.
Well, maybe just one little addition. When I spoke about movements, and this is a movement, emergent movement,
mm-hmm.
Do you see examples of movements adopting this? I feel movements move quickly to protest and activism and active advocacy, but very little to outreach and broadening their scope. Do you see examples of that?
Yeah, Dominic Barter in the favelas in Brazil, he's created extraordinary change through circles and through giving everybody a voice and resolving. And I mean, actually, some of the work I've done some really, really good joined up thinking across prisons. I mean, one of the pieces of work we're doing at the moment is going to be rolled out in every prison in the UK to build relationships between young offenders and their families, because that is known to be the golden thread for rehabilitation. So that's what we're going to do.
Sorry, Lipsa.
Charlotte.
Yeah.
I think it was Lipsa.
Lipsa next, yeah.
Sorry, Amanda. I
no,
was
that's fine.
apologizing to Lipsa. I'll shut up now.
Thanks, Kareem, for giving me space. I didn't have a question. I actually had a reflection from my primary education experience. So is that okay to share the reflection? It's not a question, really. Can I still do it?
Of course you can.
Oh. So I've been working in primary education in the state that I work in for the last 3 years, and we were running a program to change teachers' behavior in the way they facilitate math classes, because math is something that students really dread. We have poor outcomes of math across from primary to boards because of how math is taught, and the essence of it had to be how you had to imbibe joy during teaching math and how you had to have games and activities and all of that. And we did the program from say 4,000 schools to 40,000 schools. All of that happened. But I think while in the expansion phases, when I realized that teachers would not emulate these practices in classes if administrators did not hold that space for them. And teachers in India are really underpaid, public school system, maybe that's across the world, right? And so the major reason why school outcomes are poor are also because schools are not restorative spaces, and they are not restorative spaces because systems are not creating that space for teachers. And my frustration is with the new national education policy that India has launched recently with so much fanfare. I just know deep within that it's hardly going to change much in the primary education space. It's not going to be answering this particular question.
Do you know, it's interesting what you're saying. A lot of people want to know all the evidence that restorative justice or restorative practice works, right? They want the evidence. And you know, and the thing I say about it is it's like plumbing. Plumbing works, right? But bad plumbing doesn't work. So we all have to be good plumbers if we're going to do restorative work, because bad restorative is rubbish. But then so's bad plumbing, and so's bad medical practice. So, you know, that's why in response to the question earlier, I feel, you know, it needs to be done in a skilled way. It's not just, we need to know what we're doing when we're working with tender situations that involve a lot of trauma. We need to be very, very skilled about what we're doing. And it also replies to why people upstairs, if they're saying they're doing restorative and they're not, it's just deeply frustrating.
That's why I quit the education space this year. I'm so frustrated.
Amanda, did you want to say something else before we go?
Yes, I wanted to ask you, when you were saying that a key to rehabilitation is, are you talking about the relationship between the person, the perpetrator, and their own personal family?
Yes. So that's not me, that's the Pharma report that came out in 2018 in the UK. Basically said that the key, and I'm quoting, the key to rehabilitation, the golden thread, is relationship with families.
Their own families. That is powerful. That is a powerful thing. Wow.
Yeah, and that's after massive research. And so based on that, they realized that restorative could rebuild and reheal those relationships. So they've been looking at programs that could do that, which can be joined up across the UK rather than just, you know, exactly as Lips is saying, the frustration of popping into one school and doing it, but not then systemically being able to spread it across the whole of the prison system.
And it points to where the work needs to be done.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
Just feel like we need to get this stuff on TV, you know, get people seeing it so everybody is exposed to it and feels like they want to adopt it. Thank you so much, Charlotte. That has been a magnificent last hour and a half, or whatever it's been. So I'll just paste the URL to the website, restorativeengagementforum.com website. Is there anywhere else that you'd point us to?
Twitter. Join me on Twitter. I love having conversations with people on Twitter, talk about it all the time. Wow. Utterly boring, as you can probably tell. I live, sleep, breathe this stuff. I love people getting in contact with me about it. And if anybody's interested in further resources, then yes, I'm happy to kind of, whatever your particular area are, there's the little books of restorative justice, you know, are good. There's the little book of restorative justice and race. There's the little book of restorative justice and education, little book of restorative justice and prisons. You know, they're kind of neat. They're not bad reads. They're a good place to start.
Brilliant. I've just pasted your Twitter handle.
Oh, well done. I'm supposed to be talking tomorrow morning, but I don't really know what time compared to the fact, given the fact that I've got everything wrong today.
No,
I think it's 8 o'clock, but I'm not sure. And
Alyssa, can you be on that?
Am I on at 8
Sure.
o'clock in the morning?
We can check, and we will let you know right after. If people jump off this call, if you just hang on, I can just check that right now and let you know right away.
All right, my lovely, that would be great. It's been absolutely lovely talking to you. Thank you for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. Amazing. Just as well, the other session is ongoing. It's not too late to join. And it's with the person who will actually be discussing with tomorrow in the lab. It's with Myrna McCullum. So about ego, empathy, and embracing trauma-informed practice for lawyers. So she'll be discussing that in the lab tomorrow. So it may well be a great idea to hop over to get a taste of that, a bit of a preview perhaps on stage 2. And Alyssa pasted the link there. So we'll repaste that as well. So you can click on it if you want to join. But thank you, everybody. Thanks for everybody's contributions. It's been enlightening. And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Adam.
Bye.
Bye, Kareem.
Thank you. In touch.
Yes, that would be lovely.
I am just checking the schedule. As you can imagine, it is a huge, unwieldy thing.
I'm so sorry, Alyssa.
It's fine. It's really, really fine. It might very well be an error on our part.
No, it wasn't.
Because,
it wasn't
okay.
because I've now looked. But the problem was the one that I got here didn't have the time, and the one that I got initially did have that it was CET, and I have to be totally honest, I didn't notice.
Yeah, it's really it's a very, very, very odd having it yeah. And we're all over the place.
And I should have done, because this conversation that I've been having with Washington and everybody, that has been, and I work with the European Forum of Restorative Justice, and they work on CET, and so I should have been more on it. I just wasn't. I'm so sorry.
Please, it's really you know, these things sometimes.
But anyway, we ended up having a great session.
I think so. I think so. I don't see you at 8.
So what I've got down is 8 o'clock Monday morning.
Right.
And let me just have a look at the email. So it was changed from Tuesday to Monday, and then I said I could pre-record it, and she said, Margaret said, well, you won't get a Q&A, and I said, okay, well, I'd much prefer to do it live so I can have a Q&A.
Right.
But I mean, frankly, it's no skin on my nose if it isn't in, because you probably just get more of the same.
I am not seeing this on Monday.
Initially, it was Tuesday, but I had training booked in on Tuesday, so I asked if it could go to Monday.
Let me see if I see it on Tuesday still, because I don't see anything like that on Monday. I will ask again the people who are actually doing the scheduling, but I have a timetable in front of me. Yeah, I see you on Tuesday.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
Tell me what time I'm on Tuesday.
At BST, it's 7:15 Tuesday morning. Wow. 7:15 to 7:45.
7:15 to 7:45 Tuesday morning. Where are
BST.
EST or BST?
BST.
So Tuesday morning, that's Tuesday the 20th. At 7:15. Okay. Great. Good job. We checked.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. I can do 7:15. 7:15 to 7:45.
Yes.
Perfect. I can do that.
Your time.
Yep.
Awesome.
Thank you for checking. Otherwise, I would have been on at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, twiddling my thumbs.
It's a huge, I mean, Margaret and Anya have undertaken this thing, and it's both incredible and unreasonable, as many very interesting things are. So yeah, thank you for being so flexible, and thank you for the wealth of skill that you brought to share with us today. That was really,
was it interesting for you?
You listen, when you turned around, took out your pen and left-handedly, I was like, yes.
Yeah. That's adorable. I love that. Thank you.
Yes.
That made my session.
Yeah, it really, I really think that a lot of people get not overwhelmed, but let the tech get in the way. And
keep it simple.
Yeah, you know, and being human about it. And really, there's what I found with your session, there's a realness about it, and that probably has to do with the absolute honesty that is required for the work that you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And a willingness to,
yes.
Sorry?
Authenticity. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And that is, I mean, that shines through. When you have authenticity and a depth of practice, it's, I mean, come on. It was grand.
Good. Well, that's cheered me up no end, because you've got the key part of my work. So that's all I care about. On Tuesday morning, shall I just talk about what a restorative culture is?
I think so. I think that is what is needed, because
I'm not going to go into this.
I think that for me, I found that the questions were very, very useful.
Good.
Because I think that everything needs frameworks. I don't think that frameworks need to be, I think people confuse frameworks and rigidity.
Yeah, me too. Oh God, completely.
Yeah. And I mean, I mean, talk about time zones. I'm in Trinidad and Tobago, and we have had police shooting people, you know, and seen it caught on tape, because our police detection rate is 12%. And there was a continuing narrative of persons of interest being shot by the police, but police have gone into low-income neighborhoods and literally shot men in an unlicensed taxi. And then you see them taking these men's bodies out of the car and putting them into a trunk like sacks of flour. And then when you look at the time they get to the hospital, they literally drive around until these men bleed out.
Oh my Lordy.
So we are literally needing to find ways of, there is a societal foment that is happening. Because people are saying, and again, it's that thing, it's like, it's not fair. It is simply not fair. You know, if it's hard, it's one thing. If it is, you know, any kinds of things, but fundamentally,
absolutely,
if it's fair, you know, that cuts through, but it's not fair.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So for you on Tuesday, would it be better, because I've only got half an hour and I want to talk to them for 15 minutes. Right. And then I want to allow 15 minutes Q&A. Do you think I ought to do these 5 principles or just the restorative questions and go into what those different questions bring? Because I haven't got time to do both.
Like the what? I think the questions.
The questions.
Yeah, I think the questions.
They're the key.
Yeah.
They're the key.
Yeah, I saw them. I was like, oh wow. Because I mean, and they have the. I have this thing I say, I can, you know, the ring of truth.
Yeah.
I can explain these to my, you know, my twin 9-year-old and 10-year-old niece and nephews, and they will get it instantly.
Exactly. Exactly. And the thing about the questions is, the key to restorative is, how do I use those questions to express me to you? How do I use restorative to, so you can use those questions on a huge scale or on a tiny scale.
Yes.
And you can use them with anybody because no one doesn't understand them.
Yeah.
And you know what, if I go anywhere in the world, the third thing is, if I go, I mean, well, the first time I went to Colombia and I said, okay, something's happened, someone's just smashed the window, what's the next question you ask? And everybody in Spanish goes, who did it? Because they, anywhere in the world, people say the same thing.
Yeah.
Blame.
Yeah.
So
shifting that.
Yes, shifting that.
Yeah. Yeah. This was awesome.
I've had great fun talking to you. I'll see you. Well, I might not see you on Tuesday, but I've had fun.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.